Welcome to the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions, now in its 27th season. Our panel features a longtime Penn State media and NitWits tag team, Neil Rudell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of Lions 24/7 with Fight on State. The NitWits are hosted by WTAJ's Andrew Clay, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction, if you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
Coming up on Nittany Nation Overtime, former Nittany Lion Landon is our guest, and on today's show, we're looking forward at the back half of the season as the Nittany Lions are on their second bye week. Plus, we'll touch on the top players and moments from the first 6 games. We'll have that and plenty more. Let's kick it off. This is Nittany Nation Overtime.
I'm doing, getting right to it. The money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I do it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there is no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, it's been on live, you don't believe it, just watch.
It's another episode of Nittany Nation Overtime. Penn State on their second bye week. I'm Andrew Clay, Mark Brennan, Neil Rudell, and former Nittany Lion Landon is our guest this week, gentlemen. Penn State is 6-0. I know we've said that before. You know, it was just, last year, right? And the Nittany Lions were 6-0, but it's been a really great start for this season. What are fair expectations? Let's jump in this. What are fair expectations for the back half of the year?
Well, I mean, fair expectations would be to win them all. I think everything is on the table for them. That doesn't mean if they lose one that the season should collapse by any means. It's been a great start. I think they've set the table to be in really good position to make the playoff, possibly win the Big Ten. When you looked at the beginning of the season, there were some potential landmines. You know, USC was one of them. West Virginia potentially could have been. So I think everything's on target so far.
Yeah, the thing I like so far is that they've actually been tested in a couple games and out at USC to be able to show that you can come back from that sort of deficit. Listen, that wasn't like the same kind of atmosphere as a Wisconsin or Ohio State or Iowa, but that's a very athletic team and it was a good atmosphere, and we know all the whole time zone thing. I like the fact that they showed that they're able to kind of seize victory from the jaws of defeat, and to me that's a good sign moving forward. Now you don't necessarily have to be perfect to get into the playoff. But let's see what they're able to do, because we know Landon doesn't have to take it one game at a time anymore. Wisconsin probably going to be a challenge, but then there's the big game that everybody's looking forward to. Let's see if they can finally get over that hump.
Yeah, it's going to be huge, and I think Ohio State in 2 weeks is going to decide the Big Ten. Oregon obviously beating Ohio State. Oregon's going to be the other team in the Big Ten, barring a collapse. They have Michigan, a couple other games, but it looks like they are going to handle the rest of the way. we come into a game against Ohio State in 2 weeks, and as you mentioned, I think the Wisconsin game's going to be big. It's a night game. You're going to Camp Randall. That the fans there are going to be fired up. It's a different Wisconsin team as well. I think a lot of people think of Wisconsin as this ground and pound, 2 tight ends, 1 running back down your, run it down your throat. But Fickell has come in there and completely changed the identity of that Wisconsin team. They air it out. So it's going to be interesting to see what that game is like. But you mentioned it, Mark. This Penn State team is battle tested. You go to West Virginia, you have a 2.5-hour delay in a tiny away locker room. You come out, you don't skip a beat, you finish off that game. You come back, you're at home against a Bowling Green team, you down by 10 points, and you handle that. You come back, Drew Allar's handling business, and now you mentioned last week, you're out on the West Coast, down 14. Everybody is, we know what everybody was saying at halftime of that USC game. If you were on Twitter or at a family function or at a bar, you were hearing Nittany Nation voice their displeasure. But Drew Allar didn't blink, came back out, and I think had one of the most defining moments of his career in that USC game, especially in that final drive, or one of the final drives when it was 20-27, and he drove the team down the field and scored.
I thought it was good that we finally got to see the team put the game when Drew Allar's back and him lead them to a victory. We haven't seen that yet in his career. The one thing it gives me pause. Penn State has not won any of these Big Ten games convincingly or cleanly. They've all been fights. They've all been drag-out fights. That gives me a little pause going to Wisconsin, going to Minnesota, hosting Ohio State. I don't sit back and feel like I would have in previous years where you blow out your Illinois matchup. It's been harder for Penn State this year. And I'm not saying that's because Penn State's not good, but the Big Ten is really, really tough. So that gives me a little pause.
I agree with that. Now, there's been slow starts on both sides of the ball has been a prevailing theme, especially on defense. They've done a great job making adjustments at halftime, but I just don't think you're going to be able to afford a slow start in some of these venues against some of these opponents.
I would argue that the way they won that USC game was better for them than blowing USC out.
Sure.
Now, obviously, if you're a fan, you don't want to be on pins and needles the entire game. But not only, you talk about Tyler Warren.
Inhaler. I think the fans were on inhalers.
Right, but you look at the game Tyler Warren had, and it was unbelievable. But when that game was on the line, other guys were stepping up and making plays. So it's not like this is a one-man team on offense. Drew Allar, what about Julian Fleming? Has a tough first half, comes back. Harrison Walsh had a big reception, and then Nick Singleton steps up. So that's what I'd like is it's not just a one-man team on either side of the ball.
Yeah, well, one thing I will say about that is I think up to the game at Illinois, we were a very balanced offense. But in multiple games, we had 200 yards rushing, 200 yards passing. You go into Illinois, and they were really good against quarterbacks. And Drew Allar, I only think he threw for over 130 yards, but we were able to rely on our run game to win a game. And I can't really remember the last time we were able to go into a game and say, hey, we can't pass the ball. We got to rely on our big dudes up front and our backs, and we dominated Illinois. Now, fast forward to USC, and it was kind of the opposite. USC said, hey, we saw what they did to Illinois. We're not going to allow them to run the ball on us like that. And Drew Allar will say, hey, we're going to make Drew Allar beat us with his arm, and he did it.
I want to move on to our kind of first half accolades. Who is your best favorite player, the MVP, we'll call it, not named Tyler Warren? And Neil, what's your moment of the year so far?
Can Warren be involved in that?
Sure, Warren can be involved in that, but he is the only MVP
that
candidate.
would be the great ingenuity that they showed by throwing the ball to Warren against USC. To me, that's been a signature moment. But as far as an MVP, I think you have to give Allar his props.
Are you grudgingly doing it?
No, but because I think Andy Kotelnicki would be 1 and 1A. I just do. I think he's really they needed explosive plays. Warren ran for 150 yards after the catch.
Yeah.
So they were getting him the ball in space, and of course he was breaking tackles.
Yeah, I'll go to the other side. Abdul Carter, through 2 games, had 1 tackle for loss, no sacks. People were freaking out. It's like, oh my God, what's wrong with Abdul Carter? 4 games later, three of them in the Big Ten, he has 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. He's put it all together. And what Tom Allen's doing with him, moving him around, I think that's making everybody else on defense better because they're having to really pay attention to him, whether he's coming off the edge, coming in the box. In terms of defining plays, those 2 fourth down passes to Julian Fleming, to me, I mean, that's a defining play, 2 defining plays for the season. It's not going to wipe your season out, but then you're going into that Ohio State like must win. Now you have margin for error the rest of the way, and for a guy like Julian Fleming who struggled and then didn't necessarily have the greatest first 5 games to step up and do what he did, I think it was big.
Yeah, for me, I'll go Zane Durant. And I think he has been incredibly impactful, and sometimes you can't really see a defensive tackle's impact. They take over, 2 blockers and allow the linebackers to spring free and make a play. But Zane Durant has been really disruptive in the pass rush game too. And Franklin has credited him in basically saying he's one of the most talented defensive tackles we've ever had here. And you think back for a while, Penn State really has been lackluster at defensive tackle, especially in the pass rush. So getting that from Zane Durant, I think, has been huge. And, you're talking to an offensive lineman, so my favorite moment has to be Vango Ioane in the slot wide receiver position, getting motion down across and just obliterating 98 for UCLA. I think that got every Penn State fan out of their seat and cheering, and it was really fun to see. So physicality is definitely something I have enjoyed from this Penn State offense.
I want to add something to what Mark said. You mentioned the way they're moving Abdul Carter. They are using Abdul Carter on defense a lot like they're using Tyler Warren on offense. And that is just putting him in various places and making teams really adjust what they're doing to where number 11 is popping up. Now, I'm going to go with my player. I'm going with Ryan Barker. I think this is pretty easy, right? You came into the year, you didn't know what the kicking situation was going to look like. And after a couple games, you were really scared about what would happen if you put the game on the kicker's leg.
Yeah.
Ryan Barker has come in. He's a former walk-on. He's come in and he's played really well, and he's earned that job. And he left the biggest moment of the season. Now, I could call that my moment. I'm not. I'm going to go with, you talked about Aller, that second 4th down conversion, the free blitzer coming up the middle, when he kind of just shuffled that blitzer aside, and there was a little chip block, I think, by the running back, and then still came back, set his feet, and threw a perfect pass to Julian Fleming. To me, that is the next level kind of play you've been waiting for out of him, and it doesn't get much better than that.
Well, plus they played to win. I mean, we talked about this a little bit at the last show. You guys were still traveling. But how many times with 4.5 minutes to play from not even midfield, 4th down in your timeouts, have we seen a punt? And played field position. They played to win.
Yeah, I think just the confidence of Drew Aller. You think to where he was, Ohio State and Michigan, those big games last year, you didn't really see it. And I think up to this point, the word clutch is definitely not something that we have been used to describe Drew Aller. He's a lot of things. He has great intangibles. He has it all, but he really hasn't had that clutch factor. I think this is the first time we really saw him step up and could be something for the future here at Penn State in those big games, being able to rely on Drew.
I wanted to give a shout out to Jalen Reed as well. I mean, I think he's a guy who, he may not be any of our MVPs, but I think you take him off of that defense and it's a completely different thing, especially without KJ Winston. And you talk about moving guys around, he's been a beast.
With that, let's jump to our first quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the first part of this season, and we'll have plenty more on the Nittany Lions when Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
The NitWits are being brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. And by Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Back here on Nittany Nation Overtime, remember you can keep up with all things Nittany Nation using the QR code there on your screen. That's our Nittany Nation app. I don't know how many guys on this set know how to use a QR code. I'm talking to you,
but
Neil.
my son loves the show that way, so it's working.
Perfect.
His grandson taught him how to do it.
So go ahead and use that QR code on your screen. That'll take you over to the Nittany Nation app, guys. Let's talk about first half surprises this season.
I'm going to defer to Landon because the job the offensive line has done, I don't want to say that I've been surprised, but I think they've played really well. The surprising part is the depth. Cooper Cousins coming in and doing good things. J.B. Nelson. So Landon, take it away from there because I think that's your area of expertise.
I appreciate it, Mark. Yeah, so I mean, coming into this year, you lose Olu Fashanu, you lose Caden Wallace. The last time we had 2 tackles drafted in the NFL draft the same year, I believe it was 1996, our boy Keith Goon-Conlon and Andre Johnson. So it's been a while since our offensive line has been that good. Also, Hunter Norzad at center, a 6th-year guy who's really a veteran in that locker room, all gone. So you have Nick Dawkins filling in the center spot, so you're comfortable there. But now you look, and Drew Shelton has played some at left tackle up to this point, especially his freshman year, but hasn't played a lot. And then Anthony Donka, really only seen him in 1 game. And it was very impressive in the Peach Bowl. He did a great job, but there was still a lot of question marks. And going in even to West Virginia, it was, hey, that crowd's going to be loud, not a super good defense, but let's see what these guys can do. Can they hold up with Drew? And Drew, his biggest struggle really was throwing under pressure. So now it's like, oh, he's not going to have as good of protection up front. And it kind of has been the opposite. I mean, he has been really well protected. All of the sacks that he's taken have been 4 to 5 seconds back there, so not necessarily on the offensive line. And we have been running the ball really efficiently. Little bit of a struggle against USC, but as we mentioned earlier, I think the emphasis was to take away the run game from Penn State. But really impressed with what I've seen from a group of guys that haven't played a lot together, and they look very cohesive right now.
I would say the decisiveness that they've used Bo Perbola. I just didn't know, they said they wanted to use him, but you hear that a lot about how we could win with all 3 of our quarterbacks, but, they usually only use 1. And, there's been specific areas that they've really tried to take advantage of them, and I think they've really had a plan and they're executing that plan. So that would be my surprise.
Quickly, what are our first half concerns, though? I mean, it's been a good start. It's not been perfect.
The slow starts. I mean, Neil talked about it. It's like time and time again, you keep doing this, and sooner or later, that's going to catch up with you. So especially as the talent that you're facing improves. So to me, it's the slow starts.
Do you have a positive surprise? We don't want to take anything away from you.
No, the offensive line. I'm with Landon. I think that's been a positive surprise.
Do you have a concern? First half concern?
Concern. Well,
concern.
I mentioned the
Keep
slow
up, Neil.
starts.
We moved on.
I would say for us, I think it's the wide receiver. And I think every team that wins a national championship, you have a number 1 wide receiver. And even looking at Michigan, a team that ran the ball a ton, Roman Wilson was a number 1 wide receiver for Michigan. And we are right now kind of playing wide receiver by committee. I think we've had like 4 or 5 100-yard games by our receivers so far this year. And every single game was a different receiver getting over 100 yards. We've had Liam Clifford, Amari Evans, Tyler Warren, a bunch of guys go over that 100-yard mark, but it hasn't been consistent, and Drew Aller really hasn't found his guy yet. I think that needs to start to be established, and I still think it is Trey Wallace. I think he has the intangibles. He can go up for those 50-50 balls, and he can create separation for Drew Aller when he really needs it.
I agree with you, and he came out against West Virginia and was the wide receiver 1, but then since then, he really hasn't.
I just got to say this real quick. I mean, we haven't given Trey Wallace many jump balls. We give him a jump ball in week 1, he scores a touchdown, and we don't go back to it. Why are we not giving this guy more opportunities?
They got to get rid of Kodal Nicky then, right?
Yeah, that must be the answer.
Trey Wallace had a great game against West Virginia last year as well. A little par for the course. I think he's got the Mountaineers number. My concern, injuries. And these have not been little cuts and bruises and scratches. These have been significant injuries so far that this team has really piled up. And these are a lot of guys are not coming back this season. So that's nothing you can really do much about injuries, but that's something that is starting to pile up. And there are concerns, especially in the backfield. I think right now depth is a huge concern.
I would also say the young linebackers, Rojas has made a couple mistakes, obviously one against USC. Tamir Robinson had kind of a blown coverage against UCLA. That's going to be a learning process for those guys, but the depth there isn't maybe what you would hope, and those guys are going to have to pick it up and get moving and grooving a little more quickly.
Well, let's head into our next break. When we come back, our guest, of course, Landon Tangwall, we're going to have story time with the big fella, and that's when Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
The NitWits are being brought to you by RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. And by Harry's Construction. If you can dream it, we can create it.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Back here on Nittany Nation Overtime, I'm Andrew Clay, Mark Brennan, Neil Riddell, Landon Tangwall, our guest this week. We want to talk a little bit to Landon about his story, but Mark asked to tell a little story. So I promised story time with Landon. Now it's story time with Mark.
People want to hear Landon's story, but real quick, at Penn State's team camp about 6, 7, 8 years ago, I forget when it was, the Big Man Challenge, I'm there, and I asked Tommy Galt, a former Penn State assistant type guy, who's the best big man here? And he pointed at this kid. Landon was 14 years old. He was the same size he is now, and he dominated this camp with big-time players who were up to seniors. He was coming out of 8th grade. So he had a great background, and I got to know him a little bit via text then, interviewing him, and it's been cool to see what he did football-wise, but even more so, once your career ended, Landon, to see what you're doing, it's been fantastic.
Thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate it. And I just got to say that I was still kind of in 8th grade going into 9th grade, and I'll never forget Mark did the first ever article on me. And imagine, I remember getting, all these like followers, and I looked at that article. I probably read it like 25 times that night on the bus ride home, and I was still showing my parents. I'm like, yo, look at this. And it's not to say, well, it was a very, one of my best moments and memorable moments at Penn State. It was my first moment too.
How do guys like you make that transition, overcoming the disappointment and then moving on?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for any football player, really any athlete, but when you play football your entire life, from the time you are 8, 9 years old, and guys even play till they're 30-something, and you are just constantly on that schedule, and you're being told exactly what you need to do, what to put in your body, where to be, and you're just used to that. And that goes away, and you don't have anybody telling you where you need to be and what you need to do. And it's like, oh man, you kind of have this lost feeling. And then to add on top of that, your whole purpose and your whole identity was being a football player. And now that is gone. And that goal that you woke up every single day and worked towards of being in the NFL, that's no longer there. So now it's like, hey, I need to find somewhere else to put my purpose. And I'm extremely thankful. I think I have already found that. Probably found it within a year of me retiring. So I'm very blessed, and the people around me did that and really helped me. But a lot of guys never find another purpose. So I think that says a lot about Penn State and standing behind their guys no matter what, for sure.
For those who don't know Landon's story, injured before last season, correct? Forced to retire from football. Now you're chilling with us in the media.
Yeah.
You were becoming, annoyed is a tough word, but you were becoming one of those really rising stars last year. And then it got ripped away from you. What did that teach you in life?
Yeah, I'd say the number one thing with football too is when you sign up, any play could be your last play. So as much as it hurt, and there was a long time where I had to be away and that type of thing, I was never mad at the game of football or anybody because I knew what I signed up for. Now I think what it really just has taught me in life is just to roll with the punches, and you never really know what to expect, and you got to wake up every day and keep putting your best foot forward because, like I said, you never know what's going to be thrown at you. But one thing I do know is being a part of Penn State, and when I retired, from the fans, business owners, alumni, especially Letterman reaching out to me that have been through something similar, and whether they had to retire in college, like a Journey Brown, or down the road in the NFL, it was really nice to hear their stories and know that it's all going to be okay, essentially, and that I was going to figure out what I wanted to do. And I even think back to last fall and sitting there thinking, what the heck am I going to do with my life? And I'm sitting here a year later, ecstatic about where I am and really excited for the future.
Going from being a guest nitwit to who knows where.
Exactly.
Also,
springboard.
People follow Landon on social media. He's involved in NIL. He's doing media stuff. He's doing all these different things. We can't list every single one, but what are a couple of the favorite things that you're doing right now? Yeah,
you can check me out at YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall, and then on all socials, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you get your stuff at Landon Tangwall. I guess my favorite thing, if you enjoy watching the game at home and you want live updates, I live tweet the game, and that can get a little fun sometimes, as well as I do minute film breakdowns. So I kind of break down really what happened on certain plays. You talk about that Drew Aller 4th and 10 play where he evaded the pressure. I look at the end zone camera, so straight on, and I broke down what really happened with the protection and why Drew was able to get that ball off. So that's some of the favorite things I do.
Well, let's take our one last break here. We'll wrap up Nittany Nation Overtime when we return.
Don't miss a minute of Nittany Nation Overtime, now also on Apple and Spotify.
The NitWits are being brought to you by Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Wrapping up our show here on Nittany Nation Overtime, we'd usually do our picks here, gentlemen, but with Wisconsin still playing this week and Penn State, not
early, yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to go ahead and do that. So, Neil, we're going out to Wisconsin. This looks like a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think so. And Goon said last week, this is a classic trap situation. You have Ohio State in another week. You're coming off a bye. Hey, remember Penn State went out in 19 to Minnesota, and Penn State was undefeated, ranked 4th, and Minnesota pulled a big surprise. So can't look past this game.
Well, Goon's going out there too, I think.
Oh,
so
boy.
he'll have everything in line.
Well, that'll do it here on Nittany
Landon.
Nation Overtime.
Yeah.
We want to thank Landon Tangwall for joining us. Remember, you can always watch this show back here on WTAJ Sunday nights at 11:30. And as you saw earlier, you can check it out on Apple or Spotify. For the gentlemen, the Nitwits, I'm Andrew Clay. Thanks for watching.
The Nitwits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction, if you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.